Welcome to a brand new podcast. Ian McLean is a writer and the author of TJ's War. David Blair is an actor and the narrator of the audiobook TJ's War. David and Ian have been listening to their readers and listeners, and due to popular demand have decided to turn TJ's War into a movie. Since the story covers the entirety of World War II, the movie will cost at least $50 million. Will David and Ian succeed in their quest? Follow them in this podcast series. We're going to make a $50 million movie. Episode 2. Should TJ's War be made for cinema or TV? Is it a one-off or a series? But of course it's Ian and David, so somehow David Schwimmer from Friends, the insanity of modern politics, and even being able to sleep at night are all touched on during this episode.
Yeah, it's 10:55 and I feel like I need a beer already. For God's sake.
Welcome to podcast number 2 of We're Going to Make a $50 Million Movie.
Yeah, welcome everyone. This might be a shorter than normal episode, but we'll see.
My name's Ian, and this is David, and we're the guys who are taking you through this. And you're part of our team.
Yeah, so any suggestions on how the hell to make a movie, or in that, for that matter, a podcast, send them over. So we were talking about the format. My preference is for longer. I listen to things like Diary of a CEO and Rich Roll, an American podcaster, people like that, and they tend to have sort of hour, 2 hour, sometimes 2 hour plus conversations. And as you said in the previous episode, sometimes you do think this just needs a little bit of editing. I quite like that long form thing of being able to get into something. Rather than little snippets, little 20-minute snippets. But, you know, they're not necessarily publishing every week, and if they are, it's sort of a large part of their day job doing this podcast, doing their podcast. So, I don't know, I'm willing to be persuaded on that.
Let's see what the listeners let's see what the listeners say and do. But if we make them short, we can make them longer. If we make them short, we can make them longer. But I think if we start off long, you know, a lot of people will switch off before they ever get any of the meat of the sandwich. So
yeah, maybe.
I don't think there's a written rule. We don't need to have every single podcast the same length.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah.
I should mention that there is there's 2 really important members of the team that we haven't discussed on the previous podcast. And number 1 is Louise, my wife, Louise McLean. She's also the editor of the book. And she kept me going all the way through writing of that book. And I can say with hand on heart, it would never have been written without her. So when you're writing a book, if you're ever going to write a book, make sure that you're writing it for someone. That as you're writing, you're thinking to yourself, what will this person make of this? And you give it to them on a regular basis as you write and get that feedback. It makes a massive difference to your ability to keep going, really, apart from anything else. So she's very important. And the other person who's really important is Quinn, whose last name I think I've forgotten. Hang on a second. I shouldn't forget Quinn's last name. That's bad. Let's see. Maybe he's never told me his last name. But Quinn does all the media stuff. So he'll be writing Quinn something on the screen right if you're watching this by this point. But let's see if I can find what Quinn's last name is. Hare, of course it is. Quinn Hare. How could I forget Quinn Hare? And Quinn looks after all of the media stuff. So if you ever go to tjswar.com, TJ's War is all one word, .com, you will see literally hundreds of bits of media on there, loads and loads of TikTok videos, loads of Instagram videos, and all the other bits and pieces that are on the website. I really think that you should go to the website after you've read the book or listened to it, because otherwise you'll get spoilers going on. But Quinn's done a super job, and he is the chap who is editing these things that we are producing right now. So thank you, Quinn. David's video will improve. He will position his camera somewhere else for future podcasts so that you're not staring up his nostrils all the time. But, you know, that could be a fetish. I'm pretty sure if I went onto a porn site, I could find nostrils somewhere as a category. I'll probably find you in it, David.
Okay. Don't quite know what to say to that.
Particularly attractive nostrils.
It's because I have a monitor, a second screen.
Right.
So if I pull the thing I'm looking at down onto the main screen, it brings my head down.
Okay. Do you shave your nostrils?
Oh, fuck off.
That's probably a subcategory there. So what message are we talking about, David? I mean, that's not fair. So I'll read it out to you. I went, "Hi David, I hope all is well. Just thought I would give you an update. The video I sent to you regarding my interview with Mark Reed. Mark Reed's a very special guy. Is being turned into an episode for his podcast, and there is going to be a follow-up with him and the woman who looks after his podcast and who apparently is very keen to help us. People seem to really like the title, We're Going to Make a $50 million movie. And what excites people beyond this is the guests we might have on the podcasts. We should aim for 20 minutes per episode, but Quinn, my media guy, can look after this and we can just talk until we reach a natural conclusion. And that may be turned into 1, 2, 3 or more episodes." We've discussed this already. Mark Reed recommended that we should have at least 4 episodes in the can before publishing and then publish 1 a week. Quinn says that Thursday is the best day for publishing. So there you are, people out there. If you're going to do one, put it out on a Thursday, because with the algorithms that work there, it either gets to a large audience or it dies very quickly. I suggest that in the first podcast, we introduce ourselves, cover off how we got to that point and what we intend to do. Well, we did that. The second podcast might cover whether it's going to be a film or TV series. The third could be who we think we should be in the film TV series. The third could be who we think should be in the film or TV series. And the fourth could be covering who we would need to approach, types of people, producers, directors, bankers, etc. If we do all of these early on, then we might have a number of weeks to set up meetings with some of the people we have described in episode 4. This is all straight off the top of my head, so have a think and please feel free to suggest alternatives. So there we are. Just to show you that this podcast is hiding nothing.
Yeah. There's not much to hide, really, at this point. But we are going to learn, aren't we?
We do every day.
Yeah, so we talked about the 20 minutes. Yeah, I think we've covered that.
So let's talk about film versus TV series.
For me, it's got to be a TV series. There used to be the case that film had the big budgets, but that's no longer the case. All sorts of long-form, big-budget TV is being made. The streaming giants are making all sorts of things like this, and a lot of it is being shot over here as well. And I think this being shot in Europe is a must. Yeah, so for me, it's got to be a TV series, like an 8-parter, at least. And generally, I'm led to believe that the streaming giants, the big TV, they don't make any money on the first series. Believe it or not, they can spend 10 million making the first series, and then sort of knowing that there's another one in the pipeline. They can then make their money and get in a lot more viewers on the second series. So we might, I don't know, we'll find out, but we might be looking at breaking this into 2 4 or 5 episode series, 4 or 5 episode seasons,
Right.
for all you US listeners and viewers. So we'll see. I don't know. But I think, 23.5 hours of audio, as Ian said in the previous episode, this covers the whole of the Second World War. So, it would be a 5-hour film. And that would be cutting it quite a lot. So,
But
for me, it's a no-brainer. It's got to be TV. But, I don't know. We'll see.
there are longer format films coming out these days. I think Scorsese was one of the guys that produced a long film recently. And
yeah, my feeling is that they can... The only people that do that are people that are so big and successful that nobody wants to tell them to cut it down. And they can get away with it because they're Scorsese or Spielberg or whoever.
Well, maybe that's who we need to talk to.
Yeah, maybe. But I think even, if you're going to make a 4-hour movie out of this, you'd still have to cut over half of it. So I think it would be a shame.
Yeah.
I think this could have a greater life and live on.
I mean, you were in Band of Brothers. He was in Band of Brothers, by the way. How many?
I was in.
How many episodes of that are there?
Just one. Oh, that I was in. I was just in one.
Yeah.
There's 8, I think.
Okay.
6 or 8, not sure. But that was sort of 20 years ago. TV's changed a lot since then.
It was before David Schwimmer became famous. It was.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, really?
Was post. Yes, this was post Friends. Yeah. It was one of the first things that he did post Friends. In fact, this was definitely 2000s, because there was a bit of a kerfuffle around him being there, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But he was allowed to direct one of the episodes as well, I think. But he was quite keen for it to be a character-wise a
Complete
giant
departure.
leap. Yeah, a big change from Ross. Yeah. So that would be my feeling. TV series, but again, this is a journey of discovery. We shall see. We'll find out. We may be told. I don't know. Even if somebody said, forget it, kid, this needs to be a film. Then I think we could say, well, no, because how would you make a film out of it? You'd have to cut half of it, and then it wouldn't be the story it is. So my feeling at the moment is that we should push for a TV series, because I think we'd get more of the book on screen that way.
Yeah. And
I'll wait to be proven wrong.
The reason we'd struggled to make it a film, I think, is, as you're alluding to, there are so many different theatres that he was involved with. It wasn't just the UK, and it wasn't just Ireland. It was Bermuda. It was the US, Italy, North Africa. Norway was a massive part of it, of course, and Germany. So,
to say nothing of the home nations.
Yeah. And when you think about that, I mean, just getting pushed from pillar to post the way his story went, incredible. And yet there were so many like that just, I mean, even the people he was working alongside, they were the same. They were being dragged out of one location, dropped into another at the drop of a hat. And to try and cover that, I mean, I get bored by James Bond. I'll watch a James Bond film and probably fall asleep after the first 2/3, because here's another country, and here's another dinner jacket, and here's another cocktail he's drinking, and here's another woman, and it's just relentless and relentless and relentless, and every single. I mean, the ones with Daniel Craig, I think, were an order of magnitude better in terms of their realism and the sort of psychological impact on the James Bond character. I thought they were much better, but I think as a film, it just gets boring sitting in the cinema, seeing another scenario set up.
What do you think makes, if that's boring, what would make it compelling, and why is this going to be compelling?
Okay.
What do we have to centre on?
Well, the book centres on TJ, and I think most people who've read it now, not everybody who buys the book gets to the other end. Around about a third of the people who buy the book give up after around about somewhere between page 50 and page 80, because it's,
really?
Yeah, it's quite astonishing. But they just go, this is not for me, and you wonder about these people, because the people that rave about it, it's because they see themselves in the book, either as TJ or one of the other main characters. They see themselves. There is that connection they get, and You're a much more attractive man than I am, David. So maybe you got more of a affinity with James Bond and Daniel Craig and all the rest of it. But one woman's enough for me, and I
one at a time, anyway.
And if I get
it's Friday, yeah.
If I get to a new country, it takes me time to acclimatise. I'm not just straight in there, do something fairly incredible, and then jump out again. And while I'm there, move around as if I've been there many times before. People aren't normally like that, so I think you could well be right that it's a TV series just to allow people to get their feet under the table with each new location, and with the growth of TJ.
Yeah, I think the different countries, the different theatres is what will make it visually appealing. But compelling drama for me is always dancing the line between sometimes what we fantasize about, and that's very much where the James Bond thing lies. Mm-hmm. So that's, if I was sort of the hero type, if I did, somebody abuse me, I go and take care of it. I go and smash him in the face and get what I need, and sort of a no holes barred version of myself. So you've got the fantasy version, but on the other hand, and I think often this is more compelling, and perhaps why you fall asleep during the James Bond, is we need to be brought in, and one of the greatest ways to do that is to show vulnerability, to show humanity, so that we recognize ourselves in that person. And that is one of the most compelling things about TJ's story, is that we recognize the humanity in him, and the fact that he didn't want to kill, the fact that he was hugely affected by his experiences, and starting with a little spoiler alert, turned to alcohol to help him get through the day, just to help him be able to do what he needed to do. And it's obviously an anesthetic. So seeing the vulnerability and the difficulty, if somebody goes through all these things and they're easy, if we don't see any challenge, then we're not invested. It doesn't mean as much to us.
Yeah.
But if we can see throughout this whole journey how difficult it is, and the snatches of the highs, the love affairs, and the lows, the constant lows, the brutality that he and millions of others were forced to go through, if we can see that and we feel it and we're going through this journey with him, I think we'll be in for the ride.
Yeah. I have to correct you on something.
Just one thing?
At this moment in time, I don't think he drank to allow him to do things. I think he drank to get over the things he'd done.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
I think that too. If it sounded like the former, then yeah, that's not what I meant. I agree.
Because
he did things
and
then had to drink.
Yeah. There were clear episodes where he knew he was about to go out in an operation, and therefore he would be determined to be sober to be able to do that properly. But then it's this thing. I've when I was running my own company, I was 31, heading towards 32, when I had to close it down because of the recession. And there was a little old man who supplied me. I had a retail business selling white and brown goods, employed 23 people. And there was a little old man who supplied my business with shavers, electric shavers, and the parts for electric shavers. And he would drive up once a month from wherever he was based and stock up the shop, the display with the shavers and the foils. And I never had to worry about that. None of my staff had to worry about that. He always did that. And then when I closed down the business, because I brought it back up to zero. Never buy somebody else's business. But I brought it back up to zero, and then the recession came in, so I just said to the bank, we're closing down. And the bank then called in liquidators, and they were going to just freeze the stock that was in the shop. All these Miele washing machines and Hoovers and Electrolux and Zanussi and all the rest of it. They were just going to take all the stock and freeze it and then sell it off on behalf of the bank. And I didn't want this little old man to suffer. So I took all the shavers and all the foils and everything else and I put them in the back of my car. And I phoned him up and I said, I'll meet you halfway between you and me, which is a drive from me of about 100 miles. And I've got all this stuff for you. So he's okay, that's great. So we arrived into this lay-by and he got his car there and he said, I've just got one question for you. Do the liquidators know about this? I said, no, of course not. They wouldn't allow me to do it. And he says, well, please, just, it's very kind of you, but put everything back in the car and take it back to the shop. I don't want to know about it. And he said that this was the lesson he taught me. He said, I learned a long time ago that the most important thing for me is to be able to sleep at night. And I don't want to be kept awake worrying about that stock which the liquidators could come after me for. And I drove all the way back and put the stuff back in the business, and I thought about that. And ever since I have taken that advice to heart, and being able to sleep at night is the most important thing. If you can't sleep properly at night, it affects your health, affects the way you think, it causes you stress, it affects your relationships. It can eventually kill you. And so one of the key things with TJ was that he couldn't sleep at night. And that's what alcohol helped him to do. And I think that that's true of millions of people, that for whatever reason, and usually it's because they get circumstances seem to force them, or they believe that they are being forced to do something that is against their conscience. And that then comes back and bites them at night.
Yeah, and I'd say that there's no empirical hard and fast line. It's whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Certain people would be quite happy to do all sorts of things and sleep very well at night.
Psychopaths.
And others couldn't even begin to think of that.
And the psychopaths seem to be the ones that rise to the top. We've got, right across the world, we seem to have the most unbelievable...
Let's not turn this into a political...
But we do. We have the most unbelievable people in charge of countries. It's just mind-blowing how that we allow this to happen.
So, next week, what are people going to be tuning in for?
Oh, next week? Are we reaching the end of this?
Yeah, what are we going to do before next week?
Okay.
I've got a to-do list.
Have you? Well, read
Yes.
it out. One of the things I want to discuss...
I'm not sure about all of this.
One of the things I want to discuss next week is who we think could be the actors taking on the key roles within the story.
Yeah.
So I think that could be quite exciting.
Yeah.
What's on your thoughts?
So, to send it to my agent, send the script to my agent, and try and get a table read set up.
Oh.
Put your tin hat on for that one, because
Yeah.
the feedback from the actors gathered around the table is usually pretty good, and it will be quite some. It could be quite difficult to hear.
No, of course. But I'm quite used to that.
Yeah, people might say, we don't need another World War II thing. Or it might be, we do need another World War II thing, and it's not this. It could be all sorts. Could be, who the hell wrote this?
You've got children, right?
Dross.
How many children have you got?
2.
Okay, well, I've got 4, and then 4 stepchildren and 3 grandchildren. And so I'm quite used to getting stabbed in the heart at least once a week.
There you go. Yeah. So that's one of my to-dos. yes, have a talk about possible casting, but I think that's a podcast episode.
Yeah.
I think we do that together. That's the main one, really. I mean, there's other little bits and pieces, but that's the main thing I think we should get on with.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there are two strands to this. I mean, in software development, which has been my bread and butter for the last 30 odd years, you talk about three-layer architecture, where you have the operating system at one level, the application level, and then the business level. And I think if we apply this to this work that we're trying to do, then really what you're looking at is the business level. You're looking at the actual content of the finished article. And I think my specialism, what I can bring to this, is the layers beneath that, around how we do stuff, how we start to get the money going, and driving that forward. I mean, very often I had a meeting last week where people were constantly talking about the product, very similar to this, but in a different industry. And I just said, hang on a second, let's get the commercials sorted out. Let's talk about money. And people don't like to use the word money. They don't like to bring that into a conversation, but it is the lifeblood. And so that kind of area is where I'll be pushing quite hard, is to talk about, I know it's a great story, I wrote it, but let's talk about the money. Let's talk about how we're going to get this moved forward. So I can already feel that there's the creative side, which I think you own absolutely, and then there's the mechanics side, which I think I can bring some specialism to.
Hopefully.
We'll see.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Okay. Are we... I don't know how long that was, but I think we're reaching a natural point to stop.
Yeah. Absolutely. So next time we're going to have a chat about casting.
Yeah. Exciting.
Nice.
Right.
Yeah.
Say goodbye, David.
Goodbye, David.
Goodbye, everyone. I hope you find this interesting. Let us know in the comments. Bye for now.